The Galactic Council had been arguing for 6 months straight. 6 entire months. I know what you're thinking. Surely, an advanced civilization capable of faster-than-light travel and quantum computing could settle a trade dispute faster than that, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Because when you put 12 different species in a room, each convinced their way of doing things is the objectively correct way, you don't get diplomacy. You get a very expensive, very long shouting match with translation delays. My name is Vrix, and I'm a Quellan. That means I've got 4 arms, excellent peripheral vision, and absolutely zero patience for bureaucratic nonsense. As the junior aide to Ambassador Trell, I'd spent half a year watching the so-called greatest minds in the galaxy accomplish precisely nothing. The issue? Trade routes through the Kepler nexus. Simple, right? The Mortons wanted exclusive mining rights. The Yeldri claimed religious significance. The Bronthi just wanted everyone to stop flying so close to their nesting colonies. Each delegation had prepared 17,000-page proposals, counter-proposals, and proposals about how to discuss the counter-proposals. Ambassador Trell had developed a nervous twitch in his left eye. High Chancellor Vraxis of the Northern Empire had stopped sleeping entirely and was making decisions based on fever dreams. Even the normally calm Yeldri representative, Elder CNN, had started stress-molting in the middle of sessions. Then the humans showed up. Nobody invited them, understand? Earth had only joined the Galactic Council 3 years ago, and they were still considered the new kids. The annoying new kids who asked too many questions and didn't understand how things worked. When their shuttle landed at the summit station, I figured they'd just observe quietly and leave like they had at the last dozen council meetings. Figured wrong. The human negotiator's name was Marcus Webb. Average height for his species, dark hair going gray at the temples, wearing something humans call a blazer that looked remarkably casual next to our ceremonial robes and armor. He walked into the council chamber like he owned the place, carrying nothing but a small wooden box. "Sorry I'm late," Webb said, dropping into an empty chair. "Traffic was murder." 6 months, huh? That's got to be some kind of record. Chancellor Vraxis's mandibles clicked in irritation. Human Webb, this summit is for representatives directly involved in the Nexus dispute. Earth has no territorial claims in that sector. Right. Webb opened his wooden box. But you've been at this for half a year, my taxes are partially funding this station, and I'm bored. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to settle this tonight. Elder SWNN's translator implant nearly short-circuited trying to process the audacity. Tonight? Impossible. We haven't even finalized the subcommittee recommendations for Section 4, Paragraph 18 regarding, I read all that. Webb pulled out a deck of cards from his box. Actual paper cards with symbols on them. Fascinating stuff. Really put me right to sleep. But here's the thing about you folks. You're all so busy being right that you forgot to actually solve the problem. Ambassador Trell leaned over to me. What is he doing? I have absolutely no idea, sir. Webb stood up, shuffling his cards with practiced ease. The sound filled the chamber, oddly rhythmic. See, humans learned something a long time ago. Sometimes the best way to settle a dispute isn't through logic or law. Sometimes you need to get creative. This is absurd, Vraxis hissed. We are discussing matters of galactic importance, and you bring children's toys? Oh, these aren't toys. Webb smiled, and there was something in that expression that made my spines tingle. Humans have this way of smiling that can mean absolutely anything. Friendship, threat, amusement, danger. You never quite know until it's too late. These are tools. Specifically, tools for a game called poker. The next 10 minutes were pure confusion as Webb explained the rules. 5 cards. Betting. Bluffing. Reading your opponent. The council members looked at each other like he'd just suggested we settle things with ritual combat. Let me get this straight, said Representative KLYNN of the Bronthi Collective. You want us to play a game of chance to determine trade routes affecting trillions of citizens? Not chance. Strategy. Webb dealt out cards to each delegation. Poker's about reading people, making decisions with incomplete information, and knowing when to hold your ground versus when to fold. Sound familiar? It's basically what you've been doing for 6 months, except my way takes an hour instead of half a year. This is ridiculous, Vraxis said, but I noticed his claws had already picked up his cards. Here's the proposal, Webb continued. We play 5 hands. Winner of each hand gets to make one non-negotiable decision about the Nexus routes. No arguments, no committee reviews, no 17,000-page rebuttals. Just clean, simple decisions. 5 hands, 5 decisions, problem solved. Elder SWNN's crest flattened against her skull, a sign of deep thought among the Yeldri. And if we refuse? Then you keep doing what you've been doing. I'll check back in another 6 months, see if you've made it to Section 5. Webb's smile widened. Or you could take a chance. Trust that maybe, just maybe, luck and skill will give us a better outcome than whatever this has been. I watched 12 species look at each other across that table. Pride warring with exhaustion. Logic battling desperation. And something else too. Something that might have been hope, or might have been insanity. With humans involved, it was always hard to tell the difference. Ambassador Trell was the first to speak. Explain these rules again. 3 hours later, I'd witnessed something I never thought possible. Chancellor Vrix, who'd spent 6 months refusing to compromise on anything, had just folded a winning hand because Webb convinced him through sheer force of personality that his cards were trash. Elder SANN had bluffed the entire table with a pair of twos, her natural stoicism making her impossible to read. Representative KLYNN had won 2 hands through pure mathematical analysis of probability, proving the Bronthy could calculate odds faster than any computer, and Webb lost almost every hand, but somehow that made everyone trust the process more. That's hand 4, Webb announced, gathering the cards. Morthan's got mining rights in sectors 7 through 12. Yeldry get protected pilgrimage lanes along the outer rim. Bronthy get enforced no-fly zones during nesting season. And everyone shares emergency docking facilities. One more hand decides who gets administrator rights for dispute resolution. The tension in that room could have powered a small sun. Every delegate leaned forward, cards held close. I saw Vrix's mandibles twitching, reading for tells. SYNN's crest was fully extended, a sign of intense focus. KLYNN's 3 eyes were moving independently, processing every micro-expression. Webb dealt the final hand. All in, Vrix said immediately, pushing forward his entire stack of chips. Elder SANN studied her cards for a long moment, then folded. KLYNN hesitated, calculated, then called the bet. The human negotiator watched them both, that enigmatic smile never wavering. Gentlemen, ladies, and honored delegates. Show your cards. Vrix laid down 3 of a kind. Solid hand. KLYNN revealed a straight. Even better, the Chancellor's mandibles drooped in defeat. It appears the Bronthy will serve as administrators. Actually, Webb said quietly, and everyone turned to look at him. He hadn't folded. He'd been sitting there the whole time with cards still in his hand. I'm still in this game. He laid down his cards one by one. A flush. Hearts. The human symbol 4, well, humans had complicated feelings about hearts. The room went absolutely silent. But you said. Trell started. I said I'd teach you poker. I said we'd settle this with 5 hands. I never said I wasn't playing to win. Webb gathered up the cards and started shuffling again, that gentle rhythm filling the shocked silence. Earth will serve as neutral administrator for Nexus disputes. We've got no stake in your territory, which makes us perfect for the job. Plus, and I cannot stress this enough, we're really good at mediating between people who can't stand each other. Practice makes perfect. The silence lasted approximately 3 seconds before all 12 delegates started shouting at once. I'd heard plenty of multilingual arguments before, but this was something special. Vrix was clicking his mandibles so fast it sounded like a broken cooling fan. Elder SYNN's crest had gone completely rigid, which in Yeldry body language meant either extreme anger or extreme respect, and I really couldn't tell which. Representative KLYNN had cycled through 4 different skin colors, settling on a furious purple that made him look like an overripe fruit about to explode. You cheated. Vrix slammed 3 of his 6 hands on the table, which was actually showing remarkable restraint for a more than. You manipulated us. Webb just kept shuffling those cards, calm as a quantum stabilizer. Did I cheat? I played by the exact rules I explained. I bet when I had good cards. I folded when I didn't. And I won fair and square. You said you were teaching us. KLYNN's translator was practically smoking from processing his rapid-fire objections. You presented yourself as a neutral instructor, not a competitor. I said I'd explain poker. Which I did, thoroughly and accurately. Webb set down the deck and folded his hands. What I didn't say was that I'd forgotten how to play. Common mistake. People hear what they want to hear, especially when they're desperate for a solution. That's when Ambassador Trell started laughing. Actually laughing, this deep rumbling sound that I'd heard maybe twice in the 15 years I'd worked for him. He's right. Stars above, the human is absolutely right. How is this funny? SYNN's voice had gone dangerously quiet. The Yeldry only got quiet like that before declaring holy wars. We've been deceived. No. Trell stood up, his 4 arms spread wide. We've been outsmarted, which is entirely different. Think about it. For 6 months, we've been so focused on our own positions that we couldn't see past our own arguments. This human walked in, taught us a game about reading opponents and making strategic decisions, and we were so busy learning that we forgot he was also an opponent. That's not cheating. That's brilliant. I stared at my ambassador like he'd been exposed to vacuum too long. Sir, with respect, he just took control of the Nexus administration through a card game. Exactly. Trell's eye twitch had disappeared entirely. In fact, he looked more relaxed than I'd seen him in months. A card game we all agreed to play. And honestly, Vri, ask yourself this. Would you rather spend another 6 months arguing, or would you rather let someone else handle the paperwork while we actually use the trade routes? That made everyone pause. You could practically hear the mental calculations happening as each delegate considered the alternative. Representative KLWNN spoke first, his color shifting back to a more neutral blue. The human does raise a valid point about neutrality. Earth has no territorial interests in the Nexus. They have nothing to gain from favoring any particular faction. Except the administrative fees, Vrix muttered, but his mandibles had stopped their angry clicking. Which will keep reasonable, Webb said. Standard council rates, nothing excessive. Look, I get it. You're all upset because I beat you at a game I introduced. But here's the thing about humans. We've been settling disputes over card games for thousands of years. It's kind of our specialty. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's always faster than committees. Elder SANN had been quiet through all this, her crest slowly lowering to a neutral position. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of centuries. I have a question, Marcus Webb. When you walked into this chamber, did you already have a plan to win? Or did you genuinely intend to simply help us reach a solution? Webb met her gaze directly. Humans do that, by the way. Eye contact. Most species find it aggressive or intimate, but humans use it for everything. Honestly? I came here thinking I'd teach you poker, you'd figure out your own solutions, and I'd go home feeling helpful. But then I watched you all play, and I realized something. You're all so powerful, so established, that nobody challenges you anymore. You've forgotten what it feels like to lose. And you thought we needed reminding? Vrix's tone was dangerous. I thought you needed perspective. Webb stood up and started gathering his cards. 6 months, folks. 6 months of the galaxy's finest minds stuck in a room achieving nothing. You know what humans would have done? We'd have gotten frustrated by week 2, someone would have thrown a punch, and we'd have either settled it or started a war by week 3. Not saying that's better, but it's definitely more efficient. You're suggesting violence would have been preferable? SANN asked. I'm suggesting that sometimes you need to shake things up. Make people uncomfortable. Force a decision even if it's imperfect. Webb closed his wooden box with a soft click. The Nexus routes are important, sure. But they're not worth half a year of everyone's lives. Sometimes good enough now beats perfect never. I found myself nodding before I realized what I was doing. Trell noticed and gave me a look that clearly said we'd be having words later about maintaining proper diplomatic neutrality. Chancellor Vrix rose to his full height, which was considerable. For a moment, I thought he might actually challenge Webb to combat. Instead, he did something I'd never seen a more than do before. He bowed. Just slightly, just enough to show respect without submission. You have taught us more than poker tonight, human. You've reminded us that pride is expensive and compromise isn't defeat. He turned to face the rest of the council. I move that we accept the terms established through tonight's game. Earth will serve as neutral administrator for Nexus disputes. All previous agreements stand as determined by the 5 hands. Seconded, Elder SANN said immediately. One by one, the other delegates voiced their agreement. Some grudgingly, some with obvious relief, but all of them agreed. Just like that, 6 months of deadlock dissolved in a single evening because a human showed up with a deck of cards and a dangerous amount of confidence. As the council members filed out, making plans to finally leave the summit station, Webb lingered behind. He was organizing his cards, making sure they were all accounted for, when I approached him. That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever witnessed, I told him. He grinned. With humans, it's usually both. Your ambassador seems to have forgiven me already. The more than Chancellor might send an assassin after me, but I'm thinking probably not. The Yeldri are either going to make me an honorary elder or excommunicate me, and honestly I can't predict which. Doesn't that worry you? Terrifies me. He slipped the cards back into their box. But here's a secret about my species, Vri. We're absolutely terrible at accepting stalemate. We'll do almost anything to force an outcome, even if it means making ourselves the target. It's gotten us in trouble more times than I can count, but it's also why we're still around. Is that why Earth keeps volunteering for peacekeeping missions? Why you show up to summits you weren't invited to? I was genuinely curious now. Because you can't stand watching other people stay stuck? Webb considered that for a moment. Partly. But also because we remember what it was like being the new species, the ones nobody took seriously. We got through it by refusing to play by everyone else's rules. Sometimes you need an outsider to point out that the Emperor isn't wearing any clothes, you know? I didn't know that particular human reference, but I got the meaning. So what happens now? I asked. You run Nexus administration from Earth? Stars, no. Way too much paperwork. He laughed. We'll set up a small office on the station, hire people from all the species involved, and basically just referee when arguments break out. Which they will, constantly, because you're all incredibly stubborn. But at least the ships will be flying and the trade will be flowing. As Webb walked toward the exit, he paused and looked back at me. Hey, Vri. Want to learn poker? Real lesson this time, I promise. No hidden agendas. I thought about my 6 months of watching diplomacy fail, of seeing brilliant minds waste time on pride and procedure. Then I thought about tonight, about how one human with a deck of cards had accomplished what an army of negotiators couldn't. Same time next week? I said. Webb's smile could have lit up a small moon. Bring your credits. And maybe a sense of humor. You're going to need both. He left, and I stood there in the empty council chamber, thinking about humans and their bizarre methods. They'd been part of the Galactic Council for 3 years and had already turned half our traditions upside down. They solved problems with games and jokes and this absolutely unshakable belief that there was always another way. Ambassador Trell found me still standing there 20 minutes later. Quite an evening, he said. Sir, are we really going to let them get away with this? Trell's forearms gestured in a complicated pattern that meant amusement mixed with resignation. Get away with solving our problem? Yes, Vri, I think we are. Besides, I'm curious to see what they try next. As we left the chamber, I realized something. The humans weren't just the new kids anymore. They were becoming something far more dangerous, they were becoming necessary, and somewhere in the station, Marcus Webb was probably already shuffling his cards again, planning his next impossible gambit. The galaxy would never be quite the same.